torture you. Take my hand through the flames. I torture you. I'm a slave to your games. I wanna chain you up. I wanna tie you down. I'm just a sucker for pain. I'm a sucker for pain. I got the squad tatted on me from my neck to my ankles. The pressure from the man got us all in rebellion. We gon' go to war, yeah, without failure. Do it for the fam, dog. 10 toes down, dog. Love and the loyalty, that's what we stand for. Alienated by society. All this pressure give me anxiety. Walk slow through the fire. Like who gon' try us? Feeling the world go against us. So we put the world on our shoulders. I torture you.
Hello everyone, today I'd like to talk about the voices in my head. As you saw by the posting on the dry erase board, and if you paid attention, you saw all the different parts of it, which I will show right now, once more. But basically, this is talking about the three pieces of my psyche that I consider the main parts. And now I think these parts exist in everyone, but I've basically isolated three parts of my psyche, three parts of my person, my personality, the influences on my personality, not necessarily the subconscious, but definitely having a role with the subconscious. Now, when I say me, when I put me on top of the chart, the circular chart, I'm talking about my ego, my basic throne of choice that every person has. And when we're talking about me, I'm talking about like your seat in the brain, the consciousness that you're used to, the consciousness that you always decide from and feel you are a part of. Now that consciousness actually fears chaos, the lack of control, the lack of ability to choose because of these instinctual impulses that we have towards different desires, whether it be sex, whether it be drugs, whether it be anger, whether it be hate, whether it be desire to harm other people, whether it be even the basic desire to overeat or even over-exercise in few cases. But these impulses are chaotic, and we fear them because we don't have control over them. When we fear them, when we fear them, it's because we don't have control over them. Now, this chaotic side of us, which kind of takes on its own personality, actually has its own fear. It has its own relationship to fear that is not from the consciousness that we decide from, that we usually think from. And this chaos doesn't exist in that consciousness from which we usually think. It exists as an addition to it. And that chaos fears logic. It fears order. It fears being quantified, being controlled, and being seen for what it is. Being diagnosed as petty, as being basic. If our desire for a whole bunch of sex is exposed by logic, okay, this is why we want this. It's very petty. Why do we spend so much time doing it? Why do we spend so much time seeking it? We could be doing other things, that making something of ourselves that more attribute to our deepest dreams. And that kind of logic, that kind of reasoning is what that chaotic side of us fears, because it cannot operate with the desires that it holds if the logic and reasoning in a person is allowed to tear it apart, like we should all embrace. We should all embrace chaos being torn apart by logic and reasoning, that we may go beyond the desires that it feeds off of, the unsettlement and randomly obscure thoughts that it induces. Not necessarily creative, but obscure, just from one end to another, ping-pong, back and forth, around the mind. Different thoughts and feelings from our past expounding upon themselves, regardless of what we choose. We have to, that's the chaos, that's what we must fight, and we fight that with logic, with reasoning. And of course, the intellect is that which logic and reasoning works through. That's what the chaotic side of us fears. But what does what is the intellect? What does the intellect fear? And I propose that the intellect actually fears us. Um, and the chaotic side might fear the intellect, and we might fear the chaotic side, but the reason the intellect fears us is because the intellect doesn't have the freedom of choice that we do at the reins. It's kind of like a pyramid. On one side of the bottom of the pyramid, more like a triangle, I'd say. At one side of the bottom of the triangle, you have the intellect, the other you have chaos, and at the top is the ego. That from which we choose, that from which we think, that from which we have a seat of consciousness, the ego. And the reason the intellect fears that is because the ego has choice, regardless of intellectual discourse within the mind, regardless of reasoning or common understanding and dismissal of the chaos within us. We can still choose chaos, regardless of the logic of the intellect. So that's why the intellect fears the ego. That's why the intellect is second to the ego, and chaos is as well. But this is the reason why intellect is second, because the intellect by itself doesn't have a choice. It has to follow meaning and logic and truth completely. It doesn't have a choice, and chaos always has to be chaotic. These two elements aren't choice, but the ego, that's what the seat of choice really exemplifies. We are basically the soul in relationship to the ego, and the ego in relationship to its two natures, the intellect and chaos. And we have so much choice and influence over ourselves, our soul, our chaotic nature, our intellect, that we don't even realize it most of the time. And consciousness, right there at the center, the ego, being able to choose between all these things and the magnitudes of these things, being able to do this or that, being able to completely be victorious over the basic nature or completely fall to it. That is all from the station of ego. And the reason I put on the chart that it's checks and balances is that these checks and balances are necessary for free choice to exist. And I'd just like to end by showing the chart one more time that I drew on the dry erase board so that you kind of get a better picture of it. And, hey, thank you very much for watching, and feel free to like and comment, and I would love a subscription or two. So I will see y'all later, and I'll end on the dry erase board.